Well, we ran the marathon.
Finishing a marathon. Isaac, Bobby, Cameron, Hope, Tyler, Melissa.
So this is to cap off my series of training for a sub 250 marathon, and documented most of the training, but going into the taper phase, did not really document much of that, didn't film too much of that. So just wanted to kind of take this time to talk about the taper, what that looked like, and then the few days leading into race day, and then the race itself. I didn't film the race because I wanted to focus on giving my best effort, trying to PR the marathon, run a sub 250, and just wanted to be focused on doing that, running, and not being distracted by trying to film myself, carrying a camera, any of that stuff. The taper, my last long run, I believe, was on April the 19th. It was a Sunday, so 13 days out from the marathon. That was a good workout, 23 miles with some marathon pace thrown in there. And then kind of did just some easy running for the next 3 or 4 days, and then we had a 5K on Friday. That would be 8 days before the marathon. So we're running a 5K tonight. It's just a local family 5K, but gonna see how fast I can run it. So here is Strava's prediction. Here is Garmin's prediction. And this is my prediction.
Prediction? Yes, prediction. Pain.
Overall finishers, first place, Cameron Brown. Time of 17:04.8. Yeah.
He's a run coach.
Is he? That's awesome.
Yeah, he trains me.
All right, in second place, male overall, John Gaudette.
And so the PR in the 5K ran a 17:04 with the average of 5:30 pace per mile. So was super happy with that. Didn't know how fast I'd be able to run a 5K. I actually thought maybe more like 5:40, 5:45s. Kind of did better than I thought running the 5K. So that gave me some confidence. And then 6 days out from the race, I did my long run in the taper, so it was only like 13 miles. And what I did there, I did like 4 miles, kind of easy to moderate, and then 2 miles at tempo, and then another 4 miles, easy to moderate, and then 2 miles at marathon pace, and then the last mile at tempo, and was able to, hit all those paces and push sub 6 minute mile there at the last mile there. And so that kind of, again, gave me confidence, able to run, 20, 30 second faster miles than what I had to do to run a sub 250. And so that was, my last long run type of workout. That was only 13 miles. So when I go into a taper, I still try to keep intensity. So still had, like I said, the fast 5K. And then, this 13-mile workout with some tempo and marathon pace thrown in there. And then 2 days later, so 4 days out from the marathon, I did 5 miles at marathon pace. So yeah, just keep some workouts, some intensity, but just reducing mileage. So my peak week was 70 miles. And then the first week of the taper only did like 38. And then probably did about 35 or so leading into the marathon. So, overall mileage down, but still keeping that intensity. Going into the marathon, so started carb loading 3 days before. So on Wednesday, kind of afternoon, started kind of increasing my carb intake. One thing that I did this time in this carb load was I tried to eliminate most of the fiber and fat Thursday night and then going into Friday, so the day before. So I cut out a lot of the fruit. I think I only had one banana on Friday morning. Tend to eat a lot of fruit, but that has a lot of fiber, so kind of cut the fruit out. Instead, I was eating sourdough bread with honey, pretzel sticks, I got some like cinnamon swirl cake, and so very little fiber intake on that Friday. And then day of marathon, had some sourdough bread that morning with honey before the race, and some coffee. So that's what we had a couple hours before we ran, probably like 2.5 hours before we ran. It was an early morning, got up around 4:15, somewhere in there, had to run at 7. But yeah, we get to Durham, get to the race there. We are here at the race. It's chilly, a little breezy. It's gonna be raining. We're gonna see what we need to do to check in. Then we'll come back to the car, get everything ready. So, should be a fun time. And it's pretty chilly actually, which was something that I was happy about. So, going into the race, during training, I wasn't sure. I knew sub 250 would be very hard because the course was a hilly course. It advertised for around 1,000 feet of elevation gain. And then being May 2nd, it had the potential here to be hot and humid. You just never know. But thankfully, it was a nice, cool day. It was mid-50s. It was overcast, a cool breeze. They were forecasting some rain, but it looked like it was going to be very light, and it ended up not really doing anything. So that was another positive there, that the rain held off. But yeah, super, super good weather for running. But yeah, we get there at the race and didn't really wait too long. We kind of went and used the bathroom and then walked back to the car, got, ready for the race. And then we were there at the race start, like 15 minutes max. Got in the corral, kind of was doing some stretching, some leg swings, some toe hops, some lunges, just kind of trying to activate the muscles, get loose. And yeah, so we started out the race, and this was my first time using Garmin Pace Pro for a race. And so I should have, set like a fake race for one of my workouts and did like a Pace Pro just so I could get used to the screens on my watch when using Pace Pro. It's not something that I was aware of, how different the screens would be. So we get started, and I'm going through the screens on my watch because I'm like, I don't know how fast I'm running. Have the one screen where it shows like your heart rate, the amount of time that's passed, your current pace. But I knew I had used the Pace Pro plan to set splits, goal splits for different sections of the race based on elevation. So I wanted to run the harder elevation sections a little bit slower, and then a little bit faster on the downhill or flat sections, just because I know I have a tendency to, one, go out too fast at the beginning of a race, and then two, probably push a little too hard on the hills, which in a marathon, if you do that too early, that can really come back to bite you late in the race. But took off and didn't really know what pace I was running. Knew I was running kind of at a hard effort. First mile, I think we ran like a 6:02, so it was like 25 seconds ahead of goal pace. Was still kind of messing with my watch. Found the screen that showed what my pace was supposed to be. Showed the distance I was supposed to run that pace. So again, it was based on the course and the elevation. And so it might be, half a mile run a 6:35 pace, and then for the next mile and a half, you're going to run a 6:20 because it's, downhill and flat. So I figured out the screen that had that, showed what my current split was for that section and how many miles that section was. So good takeaway there is practice. If you're going to use like Pace Pro plan for the first time, you want to practice that in training. But was able to get through that. We were in that second mile at like a 6:03 as well. So kind of went out too fast on this one as well, but felt good. Again, it was a rolling course, so those first few miles, the uphills weren't too bad. They were more gradual, but then it has some pretty good downhill as well. So ran those first 2 miles pretty fast, and then kind of settled it into like a 6:15 to 6:25 pace for a lot of the race. But anyway, it goes through downtown Durham, kind of goes back behind some developments, and then you're sharing the course with the half marathon with people running the 10K. You share part of those first few miles with the 10K runners. And then they split off, and so it's marathon and half marathon runners. And then the half marathon splits off, and then it kind of all comes back to where you're on the same course again. And so you're kind of running with a lot of people, and then not really running with too many people, and then back running with a lot of people as you come back to town. And then you split off again, and the marathoners kind of go out and around and come into the Durham Bulls stadium, the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. So that was kind of cool. We got to run around the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. And I believe the half marathon, maybe the 10K runners got to do that as well. And then once you come out of there, you kind of go down away from downtown, kind of through just some development, some different back roads, heading towards Third Fork Creek Trail. And you get on that, and it's just kind of this, asphalt sidewalk, just like a paved trail that's pretty flat. And so this is like mile 12. So we've done a lot of the rolling hills. We're done kind of miles 1 through 11, and then miles like 12 through 17 is on this Third Fork Creek Trail. So that was pretty flat section, and I maintained like a 6:15 pace on there, so that was good, and was overall feeling good up to that point. Some of the rolling hills after we left the Durham Bulls Stadium were a little bit tough, and so that section got a little bit hard. But once we made it on this little trail, paved trail, kind of settled into some 6:15s. Ran that for, like I said, it's like 3 or 4 miles, and then you come off of that onto the road, and there was this pretty long hill, like half mile going uphill, and that was really tough. And wanted to quit, wanted to stop and walk going up that, but said just try to hold on. And I think that was probably one of the only sections that I ran slower than the pace that I had set in the Pace Pro plan, and I only ran it like a couple of seconds slower. But get to the top of that, and then it's a nice steady downhill. And so running down that hill, you get to recover from going uphill without, pushing too hard, but still being able to maintain that marathon pace. So you recover from that, you're going downhill, and then it's just kind of some rollers for the next mile and a half, some rolling hills, and then you get on to the American Tobacco Trail, which is similar to that Third Fork Creek Trail. It's just kind of a paved sidewalk type of trail. You go down that, and that's probably 4 miles down the American Tobacco Trail, like miles 19 through 23 or so. And I had actually went when I went to go pick up the packets a couple of days before the race. I went and checked out like miles 21 through 23 on this American Tobacco Trail, just to kind of see what those last few miles were going to look like. And I knew that they were kind of a steady downhill from mile like 20 to 23. So I was happy about that, and was like, if I can just hang on to mile 20, then I should be able to run, mile 20 to 23 faster than goal marathon pace with that gradual downhill, and kind of try to race that last 10K if I was behind pace up to that point. So I knew that section was coming, but I was quite a bit ahead of pace. So I was running faster than all of the paces that I had set, except for that one section where it was that hard hill. And so I got to mile 20 on this American Tobacco Trail and looked down at my watch, and it said I was like 4 minutes and 50 seconds ahead of pace. So at that point, the marathon for me is really tough. Around mile 20, 22, my legs always hurt. No different on this one. Legs are feeling it, wanting to stop. And actually had the thought, like, I'm 4 minutes and 50 seconds. That's almost 5 minutes. I'm at mile 20. So if I can just hold on this pace for another mile, mile and a half, then I can drop down to 7-minute miles, maybe even 7:15s, and still get sub 250. And 7:15s would be like, easy pace to this point. And so that thought, crossed my mind, like, don't push it, just, kind of relax, jog it on in type of thing. You're going to get sub 250. That's the goal that you put out there, that you've been putting on social media, doing a YouTube series on. You'll get that goal, no shame, right? Did what you set out to do. But then the thought hits like, well, that's not your best effort, right? And what can you do if you give your best effort? So I made a decision there, like just hang on to this pace. Yes, I know it's hard, it's tough, but just don't slow down. Just keep hitting the paces that you had set to try to hit them. So maintained like a 6:25-ish pace probably for those 3 sections, even though they were easier. At that point it's very hard. So holding that 6:25 was hard through there. And then at this point you've kind of come back, heading back towards town, and you get there to almost before like the Durham Bull Stadium where we had started the race, and you take a left on, I believe it's Moorhead Avenue. And now we're heading towards Wallace Wade Stadium, which is the Duke University football stadium, which is where the race finished at. And so once you turn on that road, it's kind of another rolling hill type of situation. And there was a couple of back-to-back hills that were pretty hard, especially at mile 24, 25 in a marathon. And again, wanted to quit, but at this point, you're so close. It was just like, hold on, right? Hold on to this pace. If you blow up, you for sure probably got sub 250 now. No shame if you gave it your all, right, and you blow up. But at this point, we've come back to join the half marathoners. And so there was a lot of people on Moorhead Avenue once we turned on that. And you're running with a lot of people again, passing a lot of people. And it's more encouraging when you're running with others, right? Other people around. It's just, that energy there. Whereas on like the American Tobacco Trail, that Third Fork Creek Trail, you'd see some spectators, not very many though. And then of course you had people at the aid stations, volunteers, but other than that, you're kind of running by yourself. And so that kind of makes it hard mentally, right? There's nobody around. It's just you and the miles and your mind, right? And so you're thinking about all these things. Once you get to running with other people, right, you can kind of see, well, they're struggling too, right? This is hard for them too. And they're going, right? They're still going, they're still pushing. So why can't I? So you kind of get that encouragement when you're running with others. And then of course, if you're passing people and, I hear some people be like, are these marathoners? Is that a marathoner? Because they're running the half or the 10K. And so that kind of encourages you as well. There's also a lot more spectators when you get to in town. And so, that kind of gives you more energy to be able to push there at the end, which is nice. But anyway, push through those 2 hills. And then once you get to the top, it's kind of a downhill for that last mile. So try to hold on to pace. And then you make a right into where the Wallace Wade Stadium entrance is. And at that point, you got to push, right? So you kind of go all out as fast as you can. And when I came around the corner to where I could see the clock, it was like 2:44:13. And so, push as hard as I can. I said I can get sub 2:45 if I can get there in time.
Jason from LA finishing a marathon. Isaac, Bobby, Cameron, Hope, Tyler, Melissa, all coming into Wallace Wade Stadium.
Across the finish line, and final time was 2:44:53. So we accomplished the goal, right? The goal was sub 250. That's what we set out to do at the beginning of the year. Training wasn't perfect, especially for the first 8 weeks or so, but then we got in, 10 or so good weeks of training, and we were able to make it happen. And feels good. Like I said, a couple of things that, helped get me to that point. One was a plan, right? Having a plan to run sub 250, right? And then what is that going to take? And so it's math at that point. And so what is my mile pace average that I need to run per mile to run a sub 250? Well, that comes out to like 629, 628. So we need to do running at 628, 629 in practice, right? Especially on tired legs, in our long runs, right? Adding in that pace to see if we can run it late in a run, right, on tired legs. And so kind of just put together a plan. Not only that, but then focusing on diet. So try to eat mostly clean, but also consistent on carbs. So rice, potatoes with my lunch and dinner, a lot of fruit. So I was eating banana, apple, blueberries, grapefruit pretty much every day, eating all 4 of those. Fueling my workouts with tailwind or gels. Fueling my long runs with tailwind and gels, right? The same nutrition that I was going to be using during race day, I trained with on my long runs. Was doing lifting in the gym, core work. So again, all of that I think played a critical role. Added in some plyometrics, doing some band work for like some activation type of work. So just did a lot in this build. Like looking back, it was a lot. And it was that work, the things that I did in training that got me to where I could run a 2:44 marathon. Overall, it was fun. This is kind of a goal that leads into my a goal for the year, which is Grindstone 100. So it'll be my longest ultra marathon to date, 100 miles, 21,000 feet of elevation gain. So super tough. It starts at 6 p.m. So you're going to be running for sure through the night. So it's going to be a real hard challenge. And so I knew that I didn't want to just go ahead and start training for that in terms of hard training for 8-9 months. So I said, let me focus on, becoming just a better, more efficient runner. Focus on speed, getting faster. And last year, I had set the goal to run a marathon every month on my own. No set time, just complete a marathon, 26.2 miles at some point in the month. And so at the end of the year, I went all out on the last one in December and ran a 2:57, which was my PR at the time. So that kind of set the goal of, okay, if I can do that without training specifically for a marathon, can I get sub 250 if I were to train for a few months for the marathon? So that's kind of how I came up with the goal of the 250. And so I said, let me tackle that first in the year. Run a marathon April or May. That way that gives me 3 or 4 months after that to train specifically for Grindstone. But then training for that marathon is kind of training for Grindstone, just training non-specific, right? In a trail race, right? You have a lot of elevation, a lot of technical terrain, things that are a little bit different than running a road marathon. And so this was just to be more efficient and a better overall runner. And so I think we accomplished that. And so at the end of the day, I'm happy with the result, happy with the training, happy with what we've been able to build so far this year, and looking forward to building on top of it as we approach Grindstone in September. So stay tuned. I'll be sharing some different things throughout the year, and probably be sharing some of my training for Grindstone. So if you're interested, again, we appreciate it if you like this video, if you subscribe. We'd really love to grow this channel. Thanks for watching.